Hello and welcome to another episode of Plastic Surgery Unfiltered. I'm your host, Dr. Armando Davila. I'm joined today by a very special co-host, my wife, Dr. Allison Davila. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Fantastic. Today's topic is the courage to be not great.
Okay.
I'll give you a little bio, I guess, a little introduction to my wife. So, to me and to listeners, right, like failure isn't the opposite of greatness. It's the entrance fee to me, right? And so in a field where only a handful of women have carved a path to the top, the difference for me isn't talent. It's the willingness to be uncomfortable long enough to improve. So that's the thesis of the day.
Okay.
You're a successful young congenital heart surgeon. You are in a subset called neonatal surgery, and maybe you can explain that to people, which is like a subset even of that, right? That's very difficult to do. But you've achieved something that's quite rare, right? I have some statistics here, but women constitute only 8% of the total cardiac surgical workforce. Women comprise only about 4 to 6% of the congenital heart surgery group, with 280 surgeons in the whole U.S. And women continue to be underrepresented in senior roles. Only 4% of cardiothoracic surgery chairs are women.
That's correct. Yeah.
So as someone with those aspirations, tell me kind of a little bit about your journey and what's brought you here.
Yeah, that's a great introduction. Thank you. Yeah, I grew up in rural Illinois and, always really enjoyed kind of STEM type classes. And I got interested in medicine through a missionary that visited my church growing up. And so for a long time, I thought I wanted to be a missionary and do primary care in the third world. That was kind of my initial goal. And then I got into medical school and got exposed to cardiac surgery and just really fell in love with it. And through that became interested in specifically pediatrics for a lot of reasons. Pediatrics to me was a population of people that kind of like were completely innocent, were, just born with this defect that inhibited their life and their progress. And so I liked the idea of kind of fixing this thing that was made broken. And then through there, we pursued many years of training. So post-medical school, I was in training for 11 years, which comprised 2 clinical and 1 research fellowship, and then a residency as well. And so, and I think you talked about this idea of being gritty long enough to achieve the goals, right? And I think that really typifies this type of training, where you spend many years doing things that are in preparation for what you want to do, but are not actually what you want to do. Yeah, I mean,
again, I have a little personal insight into your life, so I'll ask you some hard-hitting questions, I guess, here. But, what was... back in your research fellowship, right? I remember this, I was a plastic surgeon. I was interested in microsurgery, and I went to your lab, and we were doing operations on like chicken embryos, right?
Yeah, chicken embryos.
Chicken embryos. And, I remember kind of like saying, well, you need to adjust your hand position and do this stuff. This is how we do it in microsurgery, so you could, because you were killing all the embryos.
Yes, I was.
And you weren't letting them do the research. But ultimately, again, like, not to be harsh, but your research ended in failure, right? You did not successfully find what you wanted to find, and the research was shut down, and the lab was closed, if I'm not mistaken.
Eventually, about a year and a half later.
And so, again, what did you kind of take from that experience? Yeah, I remember you being very frustrated in it, but how did that kind of, again, give you energy to kind of keep going and move forward with everything?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think as a trainee, when you go out for research, you kind of just go out with this expectation that you're going to be successful. I mean, I think we all start out our journey in hopes that we'll be successful. And so I go into this lab with, again, hopes of being successful and setting myself up for what's a very competitive fellowship in pediatric cardiac surgery. And worked very hard at it. Would go in on weekends to work in the lab, sometimes overnight. And despite, I think, really dedicating myself to it and putting a lot of energy and thought into it, we never got any results that were publishable.
Yeah. And I think that, one of the things that has, again, to give an insight into to the public into how people get into highly competitive specialties is there's almost sort of expectation that you must publish, right? That you need to fill your CV with pages and pages. I mean, I remember when I did my research with Dr. John Kim, that was like new, right? Like people weren't taking years off to do research, and I did that with him, and I published 13 articles, like did all this sort of stuff, and I had like a CV a mile long, and I remember everyone being like astonished at
Very
that,
impressed,
right?
yeah.
But nowadays, right, when you do your interviews, right, that's like normal.
Yeah, it's actually a little disconcerting sometimes to see medical students come through, because I interview for the 6-year cardiac surgery residency, which for the listeners is kind of a newer thing in the last 15 to 20 years, where students can go directly out of medical school into cardiac or cardiothoracic surgery training instead of doing what I did, which was go through general surgery residency first. And it's become very popular and is now one of the most competitive surgical specialties to match into because of that faster track.
Right.
And so the applicants are incredible. Many of them come from non-traditional backgrounds, sometimes the military, sometimes they've been a nurse and then decided to go back to medical school. And then some are just, your traditional candidates who are similar to you in medical school and have done this research. But their CVs are what you would think of someone at the end of their residency, not at the start of it. And I think this pressure to publish or perish kind of, there's a mantra in kind of basic science research or in academic medicine in general, this kind of idea, you either publish or you perish, meaning if you don't publish, your lab is unsuccessful.
Yeah, I mean, again, because of one of the things that's really dynamic, again, about the inner workings of the healthcare industry is that because of the way healthcare is compensated for most of these facilities and hospitals, right, healthcare alone, like delivery of healthcare, no longer pays the bills for these institutions.
Absolutely.
And so research and the research dollars that is given by the government and from tax dollars is really the main as a huge driver of the budget, right?
Absolutely.
And so like if you work in academics and you don't publish, you're not doing enough to promote that research concept. But it's become this sort of rat race where, I'll see these CVs like full of 16 articles and almost none of them very few of them have like significant like scientific merit, or contribution. It's sort of just like republications of republications of republications. And again, it's sort of like this idea of I want to get into the cupcake analogy, but I do feel that those are like little cupcakes that those people kind of commit to. But getting back to your lab, right? It's like, it's an area where you tackled something that was unlikely to yield results. You could have gone into like a translational lab, or you could have gone into like
just an outcomes research
and like publish like
database.
10 papers.
Yeah.
Like, why did you choose such a difficult, I guess, because you like to choose difficult things?
Yeah. And maybe sometimes to my detriment. But I think I always choose things that seem really hard or seem impossible, because I've always liked this idea of, overcoming challenging things or being a person who has pursued something that not a lot of other people have pursued. And again, I hope that I'm successful at it. But I think I relish a lot in the challenge and in the challenge of the journey of it.
Okay. I mean, and it goes to show you that failure has been along your path, yet you're here sitting here as a congenital heart surgeon. And again, to give the audience a snippet into it, right? You kind of specialize or desire to really specialize in neonates, which are tell me again, babies that are
less
under
than 30 days old.
less than 30 days old, and they generally will weigh what?
3 or less kilograms, which like 6 pounds.
5, 6 pounds, you know, again, like that's a baby about this big. And so, your Instagram handle is like baby walnut surgeon. And that comes from me because I looked at a picture of the heart, like we think of a heart like this big adult thing. But the heart's like yay big.
Yeah.
And you're like fixing holes and you're identifying the atria, and you're talking, whenever you tell me about surgery, I'm like visualizing an adult heart because I've never seen a heart like
baby
this, right?
heart, yeah.
And so you're like, I went in through the atria, I did this thing, and I keep thinking this massive hole. No, you're operating on something that's this small.
Yeah.
And so to reach that kind of that pinnacle, what was the rest of your training like? Like, where did you kind of go through?
So I did my adult cardiac surgery here in Pittsburgh, at the University of Pittsburgh, which was an incredible training program for me. It's one of the largest training programs for cardiac surgery in the U.S. And one thing that I really loved about UPMC and their cardiac surgery department was their support of women. And so when I was interviewing, there were very few women interviewing with me at the same time. And Dr. Lukatic, who was the chair at the time, was incredibly supportive of women, so much so that 40% of his residency was women at the time. And so it just felt like this environment where I would be supported and that I would thrive. And that's exactly what it was for me. And Dr. Morell, who is the chief of congenital and now the chief of the whole department, was also very supportive of female trainees, which wasn't and isn't always commonplace in this specialty.
Yeah. And they guided you to essentially the number one congenital fellowship on the planet, arguably, at Boston Children's.
Yeah, I think that's a good characterization.
And, and with that success comes its own struggles. I mean, tell us a little bit about that experience at Boston Children's and why they've maintained that moniker and why they're the best, but also the hardest.
Yeah, Boston Children's. So I gave a speech at my graduation and I described the fellowship there as a crucible. This combination of kind of extreme stress in kind of a finite amount of time. And there's a lot of things that make Boston Children's great. There's a history of innovation in pediatric cardiac surgery. If you read through the textbooks over and over again, you see all these landmark discoveries that have been made there that have made the program great. And they still carry with it a spirit of innovation in our specialty. When you go to a meeting, they're the ones always giving the presentations on the most innovative and the most forward-thinking ideals. And they're also the largest program in the U.S. They do around 1,000 to 1,200 surgeries a year. And so they have a volume of patients that allows them to really explore these, the cutting edge of our specialty. But with that volume comes complexity in managing a program like that. And as the chief fellow, you manage, a team of physician assistants, of fellows, and there's 10 surgeons. So you manage them and their specialties. You're on call all the time, 24/7. And then you're also expected to prepare for all your surgeries and present at all of these conferences every week. And so, I tell people it's the hardest I've ever worked in all of my life.
When is a time, tell me a story of a time you failed.
Yeah. This won't mean anything to most people, but I was supposed to do my first tetralogy of Fallot case, which is a fairly, of the things we do, we do a lot of different types of surgery. It's one of the more common operations that we do. And I was supposed to do my very first one. And I was really excited about it, and I prepared. And then I ended up being up for 2.5 days straight operating. I had done 3 surgeries in basically 2 days. And so I hadn't slept, and I was supposed to do that case, and I had told my attending about it, and we had talked about it in advance. And so I had to call him that morning and say, I'm really sorry. I am just too tired, and I don't think it's the right thing to do. And that was really disappointing for me. And obviously, eventually, I got to do a surgery like that later. But I felt like a failure at the time, that I couldn't meet up to the expectations of this great place.
Yeah. No, I mean, so, one thing I want to talk about now that we've heard a little bit about you, right, is, number one, again, I talked in the last episode about how we're hiring and why working at the Pittsburgh Center for Plastic Surgery is a hard place to work. And I would hope that by now the listeners realize that the doctors Davila basically constantly are trying to just achieve the impossible, right? It's like that's kind of our mindset to go into things saying, well, what hasn't been done before? How can we break these ceilings and change not only healthcare, but others and help them achieve something that they haven't achieved before. And, we were listening to a great podcast during employee development about the idea of the cupcake, the birthday cake, and the wedding cake. And the idea was, the wedding cake is kind of what you dream of, right? Like if you are in this field of congenital heart surgery, the wedding cake is like, well, becoming a congenital heart surgeon, it's that like pinnacle achievement. And for everyone who's watching the Olympics, right, the idea of being on the podium and winning a gold medal. But my philosophy is that if all you do is focus on the podium, all you do is focus on the gold medal, you're going to struggle, right?
Yeah, you've lost sight of the journey to get there.
Correct. And so this idea is, you start by making a really great cupcake, right? And, and it's not making pieces of a wedding cake. You're not like kind of half-assing it or making something that's like incomplete. You make a fully fledged cupcake, right? And along the way, you'll fail. You'll fail to make cupcakes sometimes, like for example, with you and the research or, that case that you weren't able to do. And it's those critical moments that form the foundation of the lifelong pursuit of excellence. Like you're going for a incredible cupcake each time. And so each cupcake, it's like you're showing up again and again and again. And if what you want is for it to be comfortable and, and just have confidence that like, it's not going to lead you to success.
Yeah, I think in terms of your cupcake analogy, I think of like in residency or in fellowship, maybe, and you can subdivide your cupcakes any way you like, right? Whether it's completing an excellent surgery or leading an excellent team for a series of months through a rotation or whatever it is, however you define that for yourself. And, students always, I like to mentor young people, especially young women, and they always ask me, like, what's the secret sauce to get to where you are, right? Because as you've alluded to, I did graduate from this top program that allowed me to get a really excellent job. And now I am doing what I've always dreamed, which is operating on small babies, right? In the first week of life, typically. And that is often reserved for very senior surgeons and not to put too fine a point on it, but often very senior male surgeons. And so there are very few women in the United States that are getting to do the surgeries that I'm getting to do. And so people always ask, like, how did I get to that point? And I think to your cake analogy, for me, it was always focusing on what was the task in front of me, but not losing sight of the wedding cake at the end. And saying, I'm going to be the best version of a chief resident or the best version of, on Dr. Lukatich's service, for example, I was on thoracic for 3 months and I'm not going to do lung or esophagus surgery, but I also want to be the best version of myself for those patients and for that team.
Yeah, I mean, I can't stress that enough. In the business world, you listen to Buffett, you listen to, Musk, you listen to these guys and they talk about how, or not Musk, this was a Steve Jobs thing, right? It's like what you need to do is focus on, in a sense, what is the most important thing you need to accomplish in the next 24 hours, right? But you can kind of expand that a little bit, right? It's like the principle there is no matter what you are doing, no matter what current level you are at in your career, be the best at it.
At it.
Period.
Yeah.
Like,
I'll be
story.
the best thoracic surgeon, trainee I can possibly be.
Yeah.
Again, and even though I will never do those operations, I also wanted to prove to the team and to the patients that I could do the best at that,
Yes.
at that moment.
And I think that's the key, because I see this a lot in trainees and people, just anybody in life. They're like, this is not my job, or this is not what I want to do for my future, so I'm going to half-ass it. But I'll remember that critical line: the way you do one thing is the way you do everything.
Everything.
Right? And if you think that you're suddenly going to get to the end, your wedding cake, and you're going to have delivered an awesome wedding cake without having first practiced on the cupcakes, like you're very sorely mistaken. You know?
Absolutely. And I never would have known that high achieving, that making that excellent cupcake on Dr. Lukatich's service was actually one of the key reasons that allowed me to match at Boston Children's.
Yeah, because he saw the kind of person who you were, who places this attention into detail, into even the things that seemingly shouldn't matter to you.
Absolutely.
Right? And people see that at all levels, especially leadership, and especially leaders who have achieved a lot of things, you know? The second part I want to talk about is sort of like when you're not able to make the cupcake, right? The other thing that I think is that creates a person like you that reaches that kind of level is the idea that failure is the point. And I want to talk about Ilya Malinin, and his performance at the Olympics, and the idea that, you know, no one on earth is perfect. There are zero perfect people.
Sure.
And so by definition, you must make mistakes. It's essential, right? Like, no one is going around doing everything right every single day.
All the time.
And there's two types of mistakes. There's mistakes that you notice for yourself, which are the easy ones. You'll just fix them yourself, right?
Sure.
Unless you don't want to for some reason. And then there are the ones that you don't see, right?
Right.
And if you're trying to become the best version of yourself, the only way you can do that is by having other people point out when you're making those mistakes. It's like
by getting feedback.
That's like the definition, right?
Absolutely.
And so what I think is impressive about Ilya Malinin, or any of the Olympic athletes, right, is that you have these individuals who are at, you know, arguably the best in the world at what they do. And the way they test themselves is by putting themselves out there on the most public stage possible to be criticized by people who are not in the arena at all.
Sitting on their couch at home.
Yeah, sitting on their couch at home. I mean, tell me kind of what, you know, you're a big follower of the Olympics. Like, tell me a little bit about Ilya Malinin and why the story was inspirational for you, and kind of what you felt when he didn't place, he didn't podium.
Yeah, I love the Olympics in part because my dad and I would watch it growing up. And so it has a lot of nostalgia for me. We would sit on the couch and watch the Olympics every 2 years. And Ilya Malinin, and I should backtrack. I also like the idea of elite athletes because it mirrors a little bit of the way that I see surgical training and kind of a little bit of my journey in terms of like reaching this kind of like very challenging specialty and all of the steps that I had to go to get there.
Sure.
And so I see elite athletes as having this kind of similar challenging path. Mm-hmm. And so Ilya Malinin is quite exceptional for anybody who follows the Olympics or figure skating. Both of his parents were Olympic skaters, figure skaters, and he has really rose up as this, you know, the favorite to win the Olympic medal and had won world championships, I think 3 times in a row. And so everyone expected Ilya to be the favorite to win the gold. And he made a couple small errors in the team challenge, but did well enough for them to win the team gold medal. But then when he was in the singles event, the independent male event, he fell twice and actually failed to medal at all, which was a massive shock for anyone who had been following his career or who had been watching the Olympics. And, you know, obviously I was heartbroken for him, you know, as someone watching from home, and again, knowing the amount of preparation and training that he had to do to get to that point. Right. But I also think as a lesson for anyone watching at home, and probably for Ilya himself, is to watch the idea of such a public failure, and not just that he failed, but how he responded to the failure.
Correct. Yeah.
How he went up and congratulated the kid who won the gold medal instead. And then watching his gala performance several days later, where it was kind of this like a bit of a phoenix rising from the ashes. He created this whole gala program to kind of like artistically show the pressure that he was under, but he was going to rise above it.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't. Again, most times in the gala program, no one does any stunts, right? Because they
don't want to get injured.
They don't want to get injured, and yet he took the gala program to basically do 2 quads and a backflip, right? Yeah. Which is something that, again, until recently was sort of banned from the Olympics due to its danger. And so, I can't remember what was it saying in the music. It's like, is this what you want, or is it like
something about fear and
like,
is this what you wanted?
Is this what you wanted, right? And
yeah.
He does the backflip in this moment where the song says, "Is this what you wanted?" Kind of speaking to the crowd, like, "Is this what you wanted me to see?" To it's a little tongue in cheek, right? It's sort of like you put all this pressure on me to do this thing, and to me, like, this is my art. And were you entertained, right? Like Gladiator, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, like, again, the lesson that I kind of took away from it is that, the question is not if you're going to fail. And anyone sitting there and who's like afraid of failure and who's like, oh, I'm scared I'll fail. I'm scared of telling the boss. I'm scared of telling Dr. Davila that I've not succeeded. Like, they're missing the point, right? It's when you fail, because you will, how you're going to confront that failure and what you're going to do next, right? Like, people like Ilya he's not seeking moments where everything goes smoothly, because then he's not learning, right? He is seeking moments when he is not great. That is what he's seeking, because every time he's not great,
he learns something from it.
He learns something, and that's when he grows. And real growth is rarely visible until you've actually already started it,
Yeah, and his particular story is a bit unique in terms, a lot of us fail in silence or in the quiet, and then we have to grapple with our own failures. Whereas, his is on one of the most public stages in the world.
I mean, this is a big pushback that I have, Allison. Like, why do we want to always hide in our shame of failure alone, right? Everyone fails. Everyone on this planet fails. No one is perfect, and yet we sit around pretending like the person next to us has never not seen success. And so, like, when you mentor these individuals, right, that's what they see. They just see like success after success after success, and they haven't noticed all the failure along the way. And most of the time, you can't recognize your own failures even when you're in them. Like, sometimes you'll come home and tell me like this story, like you're all excited, and I'll be like, you didn't do a good job there. I'll just tell you.
Yeah.
And I like kind of take the wind out of your sails sometimes. Like,
that's true.
What do you mean? Like, and I'm like, I know you're proud of this, but that was not good. Right. And so sometimes you can't, like, if you already knew you were going to fail, you would have fixed it already. Right.
Sure.
You would have. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the point of developing. It's having someone tell you the blind spots that you don't see and then improving. That's why Ilya has a coach. Right.
Right.
And so that's why I push back so hard on these self-help books and this like kind of superficial advice, this idea that like, don't criticize in public. Like, if you can't get out on a public stage and risk being imperfect and expose your shortcomings, then how do you expect to become great?
Yeah, I don't think we can, right? I remember reading about, speaking of coaches, Atul Gawande talked about hiring an intraoperative coach. He's for those you don't know, he's a writer, but also an ENT surgeon. And he writes this book called Better, and how he went about becoming a better surgeon and a better writer and just being better. And one of the ways he did it is he invited critique into his operating room. And I don't remember who he chose as a coach, but he basically had someone watch him operate for 6 months and can give him constructive feedback.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I believe in group practice, right? It's like you see these plastic surgeons in solo practice, they never get feedback. They think they're doing great things and they are not, right?
Yeah, and they live in this, speaking of living in a vacuum, right? They're living in a vacuum and there's no one there anymore to tell them that they're doing a good job or not doing a good job.
Tur critiques me, I critique him. Like, we're here, and my whole team, I want them to critique me. I publicly display every time I fail because I need to know what I can do better, you know? So yeah, I think as we wrap up here, you know, greatness, especially in these high risk competitive realms like congenital heart surgery and plastic, I mean, it's not the absence of failure. It's the willing to face failure with an audience, you know, to take that feedback, be vulnerable. And so if you're asking, how do you become, you know, one of the few female congenital heart surgeon and neonatal heart surgeons on the planet, you do so by failing as publicly as you can. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
This was a really nice chat. So thank you everyone for joining us. Again, I'm Dr. Armando Davila. This is my wife, Dr. Allison Davila. And hope to see you next time. Thanks.